Well, good Friday, countryside. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Just as I was reading this week, sorry, I have to get all of my settings done here because I am not good at doing online stuff. Anyway, that all being said, not my spiritual gift, the internet. Um, what I read this week, actually, I read yesterday, and this is what struck me. It's First Samuel 31, and it recounts the death of King Saul. And if you ask me, this is one of the saddest chapters in all the scriptures. And I say that because of just the trajectory of Saul's life. I mean, when you think all the way back, if you're a reader of the Bible and you think all the way back to early in First Samuel, uh, eh, Saul was a humble man. He did not want recognition, and we come to the end of his life, and it seems like he has just scuttled his life. And his defiance of God was the thing that brought him down. Actually, theologian F.B. Meyer says of this chapter and of Saul's life, he says, much has happened since Saul's designation as king. Alas, that so bright a dawn should have clouded in such a sunset. Like a noble tree, Saul fell before the storm. He fell because he had never prayed as David did to be cleansed from secret faults and to be held back from presumptuous sins. The only gleam of light on that terrible day was the chivalrous deed of Jabesh Gilead. So, if you're a reader of the Bible and you've read Psalm 31, it recounts in very short order the death of Saul and his sons. It's This chapter is sad because of Saul's trajectory. It's sad because of the death of Jonathan and Saul's other sons. It's sad because of the death of all the servants of Israel. And it's sad because the Philistines strike a death blow to the king of Israel. All throughout First Samuel, David won't raise his hand against Saul, even though David knows that God has anointed him king. He will not raise his hand against Saul because Saul was God's anointed. God anointed Saul as king over Israel, and even in Saul's disobedience, God had still appointed Saul to this role, and now at the end of his life, we find him in a battle, wounded. He falls on his own sword. Whatever you believe about that, that's not the point of this little discussion. But it is interesting to note that now that Saul is gone, David will step in as king, and even though David isn't perfect, even though David commits some pretty heinous sins, he is called a man after God's own heart. He seeks repentance, and Saul chose not to. Saul chose instead to lash out against David, to lash out against the Lord. And his end was not marked with the humility that his beginning began with. And so that's why I was struck so much by this passage. But there is a bright note, like F.B. Meyer said. There's a bright note. The men of Jabesh Gilead, they when they find out that Saul has been killed in battle, his body stolen, his armor taken, his body desecrated, and hung from the city walls, the men of Jabesh Gilead go and they take the bodies of Saul and his sons and they give them a proper burial. Why is that significant? Well, if you remember back to First Samuel 11, Jabesh Gilead was surrounded by a foreign power. They were given terms. They were going to be all the men of the city were going to be wiped out, and so, or not wiped out. They were going to be humiliated. They were going to be maimed, in essence. And when they send out word for help, who responds but Saul, the new king of Israel? He rallies all of Israel and he goes down and he saves Jabesh Gilead. And that city remembers the debt that they owe to Saul. And they, as faithful men, go and retrieve the bodies and give them a proper burial, so that the king of Israel, his body will not be made mockery of. And so we see, even in the darkness here, even in the death of Saul, we see a bright spot, a moment of light. And so we look at this, and for us, I mean, the story is sad. This, whatever you want to make of it, maybe you're somebody who thinks Saul got what he deserved, but still, it's a sad story, and we should view it as such. And then we should reflect on our own lives. Do I follow the Lord more like David? Am I a person after God's own heart? Am I a man after God's own heart? Or am I somebody who lacks humility, even though I claim salvation? And so, we sometimes read these stories as warnings. The New Testament tells us that the Old Testament is written for our benefit. It is there to teach us, to train us, to help us walk the straight and narrow. And so that's a good question. The nation of Israel, after the death of Saul, eventually looked to David to be their leader, and through David's line, we find Jesus is promised. He is the ultimate fulfillment of all the promises that we find in the Old Testament. And so we need to ask ourselves, do we walk in a manner that tells the world around us, convinces the people around us that we are followers of Jesus, or that we are kings unto ourselves? So that was one of the things that kind of stuck out to me as I read 1 Samuel chapter 31. Hopefully that brings a little help to you if you are reading it. And thanks for joining me today. Love you, praying for you. We will see you again next week. Bye-bye.